Hello, everybody. Welcome to VC Masters on the Pod TV network. My name is Nick Pellavita. I will not be your host today because we have our host who's going to be showing up, who's a professor at Duke University, and we're going to bring him in right now, and a special guest today that you're going to see, and Dr. Salman Azhar. It looks like we got a special program, so I can't wait to listen to our special guest and see what he has on VC Masters. So I'll turn it over to you, and let's bring in the special guest, okay?
Wonderful. Well, welcome to the show. Today we are going to have Eric Satz with us. He is the founder and CEO of Alto. Alto helps people invest their retirement accounts in alternative investments. And one of the inspirations of me investing in Alto was that Peter Thiel made a lot of money with his Roth IRA tax-free. And I wanted to do the same, and I wanted other people to do the same. So with that, let's welcome Eric.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful having you, Eric. So why did you start Alto? How did it all come about?
That's a great question. I actually haven't told the story in a minute, but and by the way, the music, if the music at the beginning of this podcast doesn't make you dance, I don't know what will. That's just an awesome track to come into. Definitely raises the level of energy. But back in 2013, I was a manager of a venture capital fund, and I was investing alongside the fund with personal capital. And I had the idea that from a duration matching standpoint, as well as a tax advantage standpoint, I should use my retirement money to invest in these portfolio companies. The first problem I had in doing that was I didn't know if that was illegal. So I quickly went to Google and I typed, invest retirement money in private company. And Google told me that this was legal and that there was some way to do this. So that was a good first step. But then I had to go about figuring out how to do it. And this is where I unearthed at least for me, unearthed the self-directed IRA industry, which I was, after 25 years of investing, I had never heard of this before. And so I went through the process of making my first self-directed IRA investment. And that took me about 10 weeks, which is a really long time to make an investment. It was incredibly complicated. It was expensive. And I, of course, thought, well, I clearly chose the wrong custodian to try and do this. And so I ended up making two more self-directed IRA investments with other custodians. But what I learned was that, unfortunately, this industry, which was very mom and pop oriented, very paper intensive, fax machines, phone calls, lots of emails, it really hadn't developed beyond 1973 when this was created with ERISA. And so I had this idea of maybe bringing the industry into the 21st century. But the first thing I had to figure out was whether I was the only person with this problem, whether anybody else cared. And if other people cared, how much did they care? And how much money were we talking about here? And what I didn't know at the time, and it was certainly somewhat counterintuitive, was that there was about $9 trillion sitting in retirement accounts, specifically IRA accounts. And IRA accounts as an aggregate bucket were now larger than 401k accounts. And that's the counterintuitive part. And IRA accounts were growing at a faster clip than 401k accounts. And when I saw this data, coupled with the fact that less than 2% of these assets get invested into what at the time was only referred to as alternative assets, and today is referred to as private markets, private equity, private credit, private this, private that, but not quote unquote alternative, because that's scary. All right. I was like, wow, if we could actually through technology and scalability, create a scenario where individuals in the millions, as opposed to the hundreds of thousands, could have access to the self-directed IRA industry, and we could raise that sort of level of capital from less than 2% to more like, call it 10 to 15%. And you multiply that against the $10 trillion. Today, it's actually $14 to $15 trillion sitting in IRA accounts. Well, then that's a lot of capital to unleash. And not only could we change the direction and fate of retirement in the United States, but we could create a really interesting business while doing so. And that's how and why Alto. And today we have 30,000 clients and $2 billion in assets under custody, and we enable people to invest in all kinds of private market opportunities: private equity, real estate, private credit, and even the most alternative of alternatives, crypto. So, short question, long answer.
Well, lovely answer. So my wife and I are two of those 30,000 investors and growing investors. We just joined in last year. But we also invested in Alto through Moment Ventures, which was started by my high school buddy, Amar. And that's how I got introduced to Alto. And one of the things that I really like about Alto is that I could take my IRA money, I could convert it into Roth, and then my VC investments can grow tax-free in that. So I don't owe any taxes in that whole thing. Eric, I'm curious how many people are aware of that Roth exemptions in terms of tax-free growths, and how many are using that? And is there kind of like an education that needs to be done there?
There's more education that needs to be done there. And by the way, Amar is one of my favorite people, like just a superhuman being, and also a great investor. But the conversion capability, while the understanding of the mechanics are known to some, it's still a minority. And I think more and more, what we will see happen over the next sort of 5 to 10 years is more people taking advantage of that conversion capability. And obviously what you're referring to, right? Just for those who don't know, if you're investing out of a traditional IRA account, you're deferring taxes until you're taking retirement distributions. And when you take those distributions, then you're paying taxes based on your income at that time of distribution. With a Roth, you go ahead and you pay the tax today, such that when you retire and take distributions, you take that money out tax-free. And that's the that's the agreement we've made with the government, right? I'm gonna give you money today, so that tomorrow I don't owe you anything. And sometimes Albert Einstein gets credited with the eighth wonder of the world being compounding interest or returns. I honestly don't know who said it, but anyone who can run a quick math equation in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever you maybe use an HP calculator still, I don't know. You can quickly see over time what happens to a single dollar, if that's compounding return at, call it 8%. So it gets to be a big number over 30 years. Oh, you're on mute.
There are a couple of interesting rules here that kind of are useful for investors. So let's say you have $100,000 in your IRA and you pay taxes on it. You will pay taxes on that $100,000. VC investments typically grow at about 20% per year, which means a double in about every 4 years or so. And there's a quick calculations that you can do. So let's say you have 20 years to retirement. Your investments would double 5 times during this time. So there would be about 30 times and $3 million, right? So if you pay taxes on that 100,000 now, you would not pay taxes on those millions later. And this is a trick that people kind of forget about. Roth is one of the biggest kind of loopholes, legal loopholes in tax system. Eric,
No, that you're 100% correct. I can't really add much to what you just said. It's an incredible investment opportunity for those who can take advantage of it.
So if anybody, let's say, wants to invest in my VC fund through you, how do they go about that?
So we've built a two-sided platform, essentially. If you think of it as a transaction hub or transaction engine, where we serve both investors and what we refer to as issuers. So issuers are companies or funds or other entities that are raising money, right? And so the investor has an account, the issuer has an account. We call it the PRP, or a private raise portal, because you're going to create the account for your venture fund. You're going to put the fund up there. You're going to put all the offering docs up there. You're going to give us your bank information, so we know where to send you the money on behalf of the investor. But when you can then invite your potential investors to the Alto platform, and only those people you've invited have access to your offering document. So it's not made public to the world. It's made accessible to those who you've invited to invest, right? And so as an investor now, once I've established my Alto IRA account, and by the way, this is worth going into. So you can have as many IRA accounts as you want, and you can either roll over money from a 401k to your Alto IRA, or you can transfer money from, somewhere between 70 to 80% of the world, and I should say 70-80% of the United States has an IRA account with either Fidelity or Schwab. So let's just talk about them, right? You can liquidate some assets at your Fidelity or Schwab account. And if I want to make $100,000 investment in your fund, I just transfer that money from Fidelity to Alto, and then Alto provides the transaction execution for the investment of that money into your funds. And what took me 10 weeks, the first time I made this type of investment, you can now do in less than 10 minutes. And so I feel like we're stepping in the right direction. Back on mute, sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid the echo. So definitely, that's actually what happened. A few of my investors said, we really want to invest in your fund, but we don't have any cash on hand. But however, we have retirement funds that we have rolled over. And I said, look, I'm not a financial advisor, but here are the calculations that you can do. And they did the calculations, they rolled their money into Roth and invested through that. And that kind of was helpful because if they had invested straight cash into my fund, they would have to pay taxes on all the gains that would accumulate through the process. And it took them essentially minutes. In fact, the only delay was Fidelity not generating the forms necessary to certify that they had done the Roth conversion. So it took a little bit longer, but that was more of an administrative delay that large companies like that do. So stepping back, when you leave your employment, you have a choice in terms of keeping your funds with that retirement account. Usually, often that is a choice available to you, or rolling it into a self-directed IRA. So maybe, let's go upstream there. And Eric, maybe you can share with us how somebody who just left a job can invest in private markets.
Yeah, no, so that's a great question, and actually ties back to my earlier statement about the counterintuitive nature of IRAs being larger than 401ks in terms of total assets and growing at a faster rate. And it's really for two reasons. One, because we have a growing gig economy in this country, but two, and this is the bigger reason, people tend to have shorter tenures at employers than they used to generations ago. And so every time I leave my current employer, as you said, I have this opportunity to take my 401k with me and move it into a self-directed IRA. And really, it's quite simple to do. And once you've moved into the IRA, of course, you can then move to any number of other IRAs that you may already have established or wish to establish anew. And when you're at Fidelity or you're at Schwab, it probably looks a lot like your existing 401k, although with more choices, right? Because the last thing an employer wants is to get sued over the 401k options that they provided to their employees. So they're going to take a very conservative view of the options that they offer. At least when you get into the IRA world, the options broaden, but they're still picked and defined by your provider, meaning Fidelity or Schwab. When you come to Alto, you are now your own guardrails, and you are your own investment advisor, thus the name self-directed IRA. And you can really invest in anything that's appealing to you, anything that you might be really knowledgeable about, or anything that you think is going to have a big upside. And you have the freedom to invest in that via Alto. And I think that's really important, because when we think about the role that private markets are now playing in terms of portfolio construction, it's never been more important to have a diversified portfolio than it is today. And at some point, when you're just in the right, and I don't know how many people are going to be familiar with BlackRock and Larry Fink and his most recent shareholder letter, but he emphasized this point. He said, it used to be that portfolio construction was 60-40. That was the conventional wisdom. He meant 60 of public equities and 40 of public bonds. That is now 50-30-20. I would argue that it should actually be 40-30-30. And I'm not sure what 40 should be, by the way. But let's just say he's right, and it should be 50-30-20. And that's going to be 50% public equities, 30% public bonds, and 20% private market opportunities. And that's important because diversification is actually a free tool. And what we know is that it reduces overall portfolio volatility and it increases returns. And so what we're doing at Alto is making those private market opportunities available to almost everyone. Our goal is everyone. We're not there yet. We still have to work within the regulatory environment of, the SEC and the IRS. And we're not going to do anything to try and skate around the edges there. We're going to play in the center of the court. But make no mistake, our goal is for everyone to be able to invest in private market opportunities. And, that's incredibly important, not only because the public markets can do what they're doing right now, but also because if you think about the fact that 80% of those companies in this country that are generating north of $100 million of revenue, 80% of them are still private. 30 years ago, those used to be public companies. They're not public companies anymore. So if you're not able to participate when they're private, you're missing the outsized return. And so we're trying to make that outsized return available to everybody.
So that's really important, that the private markets have outsized returns that the public markets do not. And typically you would get over long period of time something like 8 to 12% average return on S&P 500, depending on which period and who you talk to. Whereas in private markets, those things are really outsized, is actually exactly the word, usually about twice as much. And I would really love to make that available to everyone, just not the ultra wealthy that have access to it. Do you have any thoughts on how we can use Alto in order to make that happen?
So what we can't do is make you an accredited investor if you're not an accredited investor. That we can't do. And for those who don't know, the retail investor falls into one of four buckets. The highest net worth are those individuals with more than $5 million in assets, and they're qualified participants. The next benchmark is $2 million in liquid assets, and those folks are qualified clients. And then it goes down to $1 million or more, and they're accredited investors. And then there's everyone below $1 million, and we refer to those folks as not yet accredited. And really, the best private market opportunities have been hidden behind this, locked gate for the ultra high net worth individual, those folks with more than $5 million or the qualified participants. And what we're beginning to do is make many of those same opportunities available to accredited investors by through construction, fund construction and fund structure, such that a fund manager like yourself may actually be running two funds in parallel. One might be qualified participant only, and the other might be accredited investor or above. And the two funds are tied in terms of the way they get invested. But the way Alto makes this easier for a GP is we say, look, hey, instead of having to make a $500,000 investment, you can make a $25,000 investment via Alto. It goes into what is oftentimes referred to as either a special purpose vehicle or a feeder fund. We'll aggregate all of those investors in the Alto fund, and then we'll become the single investor to your venture fund, right? And so we enable it, and we take care of all of the administrative back ends. We earn fees for this, but we do this because we're creating a capability for investors to invest at a level that they can afford, and to also handle all of the administrative burden that you're not really equipped to do, nor is that what you want to do. You want to be meeting with companies and figuring out what to invest in next. And so that's the role that Alto can play in doing this. The other thing that we do when we're thinking about the investor below that $1 million of net worth level is, hey, how do we bring registered fund opportunities to the rest of the world? And registered fund opportunities are those funds that are registered with the SEC, and as a result means you don't have to be an accredited investor, but it doesn't come with the same sort of daily or anytime within the day liquidity. Instead, what you're agreeing to is, well, I'm going to take a sip for a second. Instead, what you're agreeing to is partial liquidity. So maybe it's monthly, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's semi-annually, right? Maybe it's just once a year, which I happen to believe is a feature, not a bug. And I say that because 99.5% of humans are really bad traders, right? Like stocks going down and we're like, oh, panic, 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 sell, sell, sell. Stocks going up, we think the roof is going to blow off. Buy, buy, buy. It's the exact opposite of what Warren Buffett does, right? Like, and I think most people, when they think about investing, they aspire to be like Warren Buffett, but most of us can't do that. A, we don't do the homework that he does because we have day jobs, and B, he has the patience and mental fortitude to say, you know what, when it goes low, that's when I'm a buyer, and when it goes high, that's when I'm a seller. And the thing about private markets is you can't wake up, or you can't just log into your phone and push sell, 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 sell. Like, no, that's not the way private markets work. And so that's why I say it's a feature, not a bug. You had a thesis, you invested based on your thesis, you're going to see it play out. Mute button. Salman, the mute button.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with some background noise here. So the nice thing about private markets is always that generally on the average they go up. So there's the buy low actually comes in very early. And typically each individual company can go up or down. But if it goes down, sometimes it goes out of business and you lose all your money. But typically you would invest, let's say, in 10 companies, a couple of companies you're willing to lose on them because the winners that you have and a couple of winners were going to pay you more than that. I like to say my worst investment is Google because I did not invest in Google at the early stage. If I had invested, let's say, $25,000 in Google at that time, I would have risked $25,000 in order to make millions. And that's really the key to the private markets, that we don't think about how much are we going to lose, but we think about how much we can make. And the amount that we are willing to lose is basically the little bit of amount that we would allocate to that particular company.
So you bring up something interesting because I believe that private markets and the risk reward ratio is misunderstood, certainly relative to the public markets. For whatever reason, people think the public markets are safe. And I mean, I say for whatever reason, I know why. It's because it's registered with the SEC. But the thing about the SEC is it doesn't, when it allows a company to go public, it's not saying it's a good investment opportunity. It's just saying that they've met our requirements of disclosure and, financial numbers. And that is not an endorsement. I know we're close to time, so I'll try and finish this quickly. But I like to say that money is like water, and it's always looking for its level where it's supposed to be. And the fact of the matter is that most public companies, the vast majority, I think 90+%, go out of business. Nobody talks about that. We used to have like 9,000 public companies. I think right now we have less than 4,000 for sure. I don't know what the number is, right? And companies go out of business. Yes, some get acquired, but most go out of business. And nobody talks about that, right? And, so the risk reward is there in the private markets. You just have to do some homework to find it.
Yeah. Well, what I found very interesting, what you said, Eric, is that there's a huge amount, like 80% are companies over 100 million are in the private market. That
they're all private.
And people do need to learn more about the Roth IRA because it's a great vehicle, especially if you have terminating defined benefit plans or qualified plans. You can roll your money into. Yeah, you get a little tax hit up front, but boy, you get a long term where you just don't pay any taxes. But with that, we're at the half hour. So I want to thank our special guest, CEO of Alto, Eric Saltz, and the people on VC Masters. Our viewership in the United States and around the world, and some people around the world are probably looking at what's this Roth IRA all about? But we'll have to bring that in on a later show. And we'll see you next week on VC Masters. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
I go anywhere with you, 'cause you fill my mind, or you fill my